All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to MOS Live. My name is Becca, my pronouns are she and her, and today I'm going to be your moderator for our Live Animals program. What that means is that I will be taking any of your observations or any of your questions at any point, and I'll be sending them over to our educators with the animals. Now, if you're joining us on Zoom and would like to ask questions, you can type them into the Q&A box at any point during the show. If you're joining us on Facebook and YouTube, please know that we are not able to see your questions and comments at this time, but we are extremely happy that you are joining us today. Also, if you're joining us on Zoom and would like closed captions, you can click on the closed caption button and select Show Subtitles. With that, I think it's time that we have our educators introduce themselves, and we'll get started with our first animal.
Hi guys, I'm Liz, Assistant Curator from the Live Animal Center here at the museum. With me today will be Corey, our invertebrate keeper. We're going to talk to you today about animal enrichment. So in a moment, Corey is going to turn on our animal camera and you're going to see some of our animals using enrichment, or basically enrichment in action. So first I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about enrichment, kind of why we do it in zoo settings, maybe some ideas of what you can do for enrichment for your own animals at home. Now, enrichment, maybe you haven't heard of it with animals, but you've probably heard that word, or maybe the word enrich. Basically, that word means to make something better or improve. That's kind of the idea with animal enrichment. So in zoos, we use enrichment to try to get our animals to do species-specific behaviors. What that means is to do behaviors like what they would do in the wild. So if you have an animal that climbs, that burrows, that digs, you want them doing those behaviors. Enrichment also acts just to improve the welfare or quality of life of these animals. Also, enrichment gives animals the ability to use choice and control, decide where they want to be in their enclosure, what they want to play with or interact with in their enclosure. So enrichment overall is really great. And we think of it in zoos as being just as important as veterinary care and nutrition. Also, enrichment is fun. It's one of the favorite part of many zookeepers' days. Just look at the enrichment you're looking at right now, how enjoyable this is. So to give you an idea of the enrichment you're looking at right now, Corey is showing you a good view of our domestic ferrets. So ferrets are a true domesticated species. What that means is kind of like cats and dogs, they are specifically bred over thousands of years and many generations to live with people. So this is actually not a wild animal. They only live with people. However, the wild relatives of ferrets are weasels. So they are in a group of animals called mustelids. So they're related to weasels, mink, stoat, badgers. These animals all have long, flexible bodies. They do have a strong odor to them that is characteristic of being a weasel. But what we have for these ferrets right now are a couple long tubes. Ferrets, when they were initially domesticated, it was to help people with hunting. So they actually helped hunters, and hunters would use that long flexible body to send ferrets down holes and kind of ferret out, so the term goes, things like rabbits. So what we have for them in here are long tubes that if they choose to, they can play with and kind of use those long flexible bodies to move about those tubes. We also have some novel items. A lot of times with enrichment, you give an animal something new, change their environment around, do something completely different. For example, when it snowed a couple weeks ago, we actually collected snow and gave that new item to a lot of our animals to see what they thought of it. So that's a little bit about what the ferrets are doing right now. Next, I'm going to have Corey focus over to our other animal using enrichment, and that would be our red-footed tortoise. Now, red-footed tortoises are native in the wild to northern parts of South America. A lot of times people confuse tortoise, turtle. Tortoises basically are turtles. Tortoises tend to be designed for land. They tend to have high domed shells and elephant-like legs. Turtles tend to have more flat shells and legs that are more designed for often swimming. So those are some differences between them. Now, in the wild, red-footed tortoises would have to work pretty hard to find their food. They would have to kind of dig around for roots, other plants. They also will eat insects or even dead animals. But in the wild, they would have to look for a lot of the food that they're going after. When you have these tortoises in a place like the museum, we could just give them a plate of salad, which sometimes we do, but then it's more fun for them to kind of work on their own to get to that food. So what this tortoise has right now, well, right now he's eating a strawberry that I actually put in there, but he actually has a grass flat. So grass that was grown here in our garden walk at the museum. So if he wants to get to that grass, he has to kind of use his legs, push himself up, really pull on that grass to get to it. So it makes it a little more challenging. So these are a couple examples of enrichment that we do here at the museum. Other things that we do a lot of sensory enrichment, things the animals can look at. To give you an example, our monkeys often like to watch videos on iPads. We also do sensory, so something the animal can smell. We might do different spices or a scent that might be new to them. We also do a lot of environmental, so changing things around, adding things to their enclosures to make it more interesting. Also sound enrichment. A lot of times we'll play things like bird noises for our birds. So there's a lot of different things that we do. And like I said, we as zookeepers really enjoy enrichment because it gives us a challenge, trying to find fun and engaging things for these animals to do. Now, I've been chatting for a while about enrichment now. I'm sure you guys already have some questions, so why don't I turn it over to some of those?
Sure, we do have a few questions that have come in. Maddie, age 10, is wondering what is her name, but I think we might want to go for names of all three of the animals that are out right now.
That sounds good. I know those are always popular questions. The tortoise that you're looking at right now is named Carlos, and he is about 13 years old. Our two ferrets, who are really enjoying being on camera, I would say. The one you're looking at right now is our male. He's a little bit bigger, he's a little bit darker. His name is Bandit. And then behind him, maybe a little more camera shy, is our female, and her name is Edith. Now, these ferrets are just about 2 years old. So they are mature and considered adults at that age. All right, another question?
Yes, we have a question from Dean, age 10. I'm assuming about the tortoise. Why do they have bumps?
So the bumps that you were looking at on that tortoise are part of the tortoise's shell. So we've referred to these special scales on the tortoise shell as scutes. So that's probably what you were looking at, those scutes. This typical pattern is just kind of how red-footed tortoises tend to look. So not all tortoises would have this exact pattern, but this is typical for the species.
All right, excellent. And we have a question from Drew, age 6. What do they do all day in the wild? And maybe a good question to kind of talk about animals in the wild for both of ours here.
Yeah, that's a really great question, because animals in the wild, they need to do a lot just to try to survive their day. If you think about it, an animal in the wild needs to find food, whether it be hunt it or just forage and find the food. They also need to make sure they stay safe, make sure nothing finds and eats them. They also need to maybe find a mate, find shelter, maybe build a shelter in some cases. So animals in the wild do have a lot to do. And that actually is where this enrichment becomes really important. Because if you have these animals in a place like the museum or another zoo, they don't necessarily have to find their food and do a lot of those things. So that's where enrichment becomes really important, because we want to make sure the animal still has the best welfare and the best life that they possibly can. So that's kind of animals in general in the wild. More specifically, what these two kinds of animals do. Well, these domestic ferrets are not a wild animal, so they do not live in the wild. But we do have a species of ferret that actually is native to the United States, believe it or not. It is called the black-footed ferret. And they are hunters, they are predators. So they would spend a lot of their time finding food, hunting food. Things like rodents are going to be one of their favorites. So that's a little bit about what ferret relatives would do in the wild. Our tortoise, as I said, tends to be looking for food a lot of the time. Tortoises are reptiles, so they try to not waste a bunch of energy. So you guys, as you've been watching the two different kinds of animals, you probably noticed how active the ferrets are. They're running around, they're really having a great time in that pen. The tortoise was a little bit slower. So a lot of reptiles just spend a lot of time resting and kind of only moving when they need to, or spend a lot of time basking in the sun. All right, are there other questions coming in?
We do have a few more. We do have some questions from people who are wondering what are good enrichments for their pets. So we have examples like hamsters and cats. Do they also like enrichment like our animals do?
Yeah, definitely your own pets would like enrichment. I think Corey was going to try to give you guys lots of enrichment suggestions a little bit later. But probably if you look at some of what we've offered for our ferrets here, you probably could get some similar ideas for small mammals that you might have in your own home. So hamsters are very different animals from ferrets, but maybe you see something similar. Maybe you could do something like a smaller version of what we have here. And then again, Corey, I think, was going to focus on that to give you maybe even more ideas for your pets at home.
Awesome. And we have some questions asking about, does anything eat the tortoise or the ferrets in the wild? So do they have any predators?
Yeah, so the tortoises, when they're young, even when they're eggs, a lot of animals will eat turtle and tortoise eggs. So pretty much any carnivore, bigger cats, birds would definitely go after the eggs, and even the juveniles when they first hatch, because they are pretty tiny when they first hatch. As adults, and this is an adult full-size red-footed tortoise, they really don't have too many predators. The one thing I found that can take down an adult red-footed tortoise would be a jaguar. So a really big wild cat. But other than that, they don't really have too many predators as an adult. And then the domestic ferrets, again, remember, aren't in the wild, but they're relatives. So other weasels tend to not have too many predators because, again, they themselves are predators. So a really big predator could probably get some of the kinds of weasels and otters, but they tend to be predators themselves, so they don't have too many animals to worry about.
Awesome. And while we're looking at the tortoise here and talking about enrichment, we have a question of how do you know if the tortoise is bored or happy?
Honestly, that's a really good question. And sometimes it is hard to tell. But we're not forcing the tortoise to be here. So I guess our thought is if the tortoise was not enjoying himself, he could just walk away. We don't have him penned in at all. He could just wander away. But you are absolutely right. It is kind of hard with reptiles to see their reactions, to see their expressions, to see if they're really enjoying something. A lot of times if you put something new in their enclosure, just the fact that they go over to it and explore it, at least to me, it seems like they are enjoying that item. But it is kind of hard to tell. That's a good question.
And then moving back to the ferrets, we have kind of a good clarifying question from Molly. They're wondering, are there different types of ferrets or just different colors?
Oh, so this species, the two that you're looking at here are domestic ferrets. So like I said, they're not a wild animal, but they do come in different colors. There's 4 main colors of ferrets, and then there are variations. So these two are actually both variations of the same color pattern, and it's actually referred to as a sable. It's actually pretty nice that they are both reaching up and giving you a really good glimpse of their faces and their full colors right now. So they call that pattern a sable. And there's just kind of darker and lighter and a couple different variations of it. But even though they are different colors, they are certainly the same species.
Awesome. And looking at all of the awesome toys that are in this ferret pen here, Zachary, age 8, is wondering how often do you swap out the animal toys?
Oh, that's a great question. Because you're right. If you do something every single day, they get the same exact toy every single day, then it's probably not necessarily enrichment anymore because it's not something new. So we do try to do a lot of variety. Right now, the ferrets are having this great big pen of all different toys, but then we have to think of other kinds of enrichment, maybe stuff to add to their enclosure in the live animal center. We also have a lot of different toys that we could put in this pen. So just new things for them to play with. But enrichment sometimes can be hard, coming up with new ideas and new ways to keep things fresh for the animals.
It certainly seems like they're enjoying themselves there, especially in the tube. That's fun. And then kind of going back to the tortoises a little bit, we're sort of flip-flopping back and forth. Connor is wondering, do they ever fight each other?
Sometimes male tortoises have been known to be aggressive towards one another. Often it involves a female if they're both trying to get the attention of the female. But the only thing they really have been known to do is kind of knock each other over. Sometimes it is hard for a tortoise to flip itself if it does get on its back. But other than that, they tend to not be overly aggressive as a species. To tell you the truth, this tortoise actually lives with his brother in our live animal center, and they typically get along quite well.
Awesome. And we still have a few other questions, but we also have another animal to get to. So I think maybe we should switch animals and get to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my screen again, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an info slide on our two animals that we've seen today. So feel free to take a picture of these slides. We're looking at the red-footed tortoise first. We saw our one red-footed tortoise that was out today. His name is Carlos, and we got to see him eating some of his enrichment grass. So we're going to move on to our next slide so that you can take a look at ferret information. We have a cute picture of the ferret right there. Again, please take a picture of this slide if you'd like a little bit more information on location, food, lifespan, a cool fact. And it looks like we might be almost ready to go. Corey's giving me the thumbs up, so I think we're good to go. So hopefully you got your picture of our slide, and we're going to move on to our next animal.
Hello, everyone. My name is Corey, and as Liz said, I'm the invertebrate keeper here at the museum. And as Liz just showed you guys, our fun mammals and our reptiles and our birds, they all get enrichment. But what about our invertebrates? You may not suspect, but our invertebrates get enrichment too. So I'm going to have Liz turn on our fun enrichment for our millipedes. So these are Florida ivory millipedes. We have 3 in here right now. And these guys get to come out and go into our millipede maze. So as someone mentioned before, they're asking about enrichment for their pets. This is actually a hamster maze that I converted into a millipede maze. Our centipede also gets to use this as well. So in this maze, I put different food, I put some leaf litter, all sorts of different things, some grass from the grass flat that Carlos was eating on in there for them to explore. So they get to go around, they have to find their way to the enrichment that they want. So when we think about enrichment for animals, as Liz said, you really have to think about the animal itself and what are natural behaviors that they would do. So in the wild, millipedes would be searching for different decaying matter, different foods, and they would be really interacting with a lot of different substrates. They would be on cement, they would be on wood, they'd be in the ground, they'd be on, climbing up some trees, digging in leaf litter, looking for food. So how do we replicate that? We take them out of their enclosure and give them something new. So with inverts, maybe if you have a spider at home or an animal like that, it's a little harder to do enrichment with because you don't get to see them interact with it all the time. For our arachnids that we have here, so our scorpions and our tarantulas, we have to put enrichment in because they're nocturnal. And we kind of have to guess if they mess with it during the nighttime. Sometimes arachnids will be a little too frightened to go and approach something, so it may take them a day or two to adjust to it before they go check it out. Some people will use ping pong balls. We have used small ping pong balls before with our tarantulas, and at night we can see when we come in the next day, the ball's actually been rolled and moved somewhere else. We'll use moss, different textures that the invertebrates can walk on and interact with. And so instead of toys like we saw our ferrets do, we kind of have to think a little bit differently. So the inverts also get their enclosures changed. So like Liz mentioned, changing their environment, giving them new things. So that's what I do up in our garden walk, is they get their enclosures cleaned. They get different types of food. They have new substrate. I change how the branches are so that way they have new things to interact with. So we have currently I have over 200 baby millipedes. So that's, someone asked, how do you tell if an animal is happy? How do you tell if they're interacting? Well, inverts, that's extra hard because I can't look at our millipede's face and go, oh my gosh, they look like they're having a good time. But we can look at their body language. So millipedes, when they're frightened, they actually will curl up in a spiral to protect themselves, and they will release a really foul smelling odor and liquid that actually dyes human hands. So if you get it on your skin, it'll turn your skin like a purple red. It does go away. It doesn't hurt, but it does change the color of your skin for a little bit. So those are some behaviors that we can look at to see that like our millipedes are actually really enjoying themselves. They're checking everything out. These guys also spend a lot of time during the day sleeping. So the fact that they're not going right back to sleep and they're interacting is also a really good sign. So I'm going to turn over for some questions, but I also have many ideas and many thoughts for you guys about what you can do for your animals at home as well. But we'll see what questions we have first.
Sure, we do have a few questions coming in. The first two are good kind of like clarifying questions too. What exactly is a millipede? Like what kind of animal maybe? And also how big can they be?
Great question. So a millipede is kind of its own family. So it's not an insect and it's not an arachnid or what we consider a spider, a scorpion in that area. Millipedes and centipedes are their own family. So there are lots of different genus and species of millipedes that can be found all around the world. So we have millipede species that live here in New England. These guys are Florida ivory millipedes. So as you may be able to guess, they're from Florida, but you can find them in other southern states in the United States as well. Size-wise, these are some of our bigger Florida ivory millipedes that we have. And they are about, I would say 4, maybe 5 inches long. That would probably be the longest that they'll be. And width-wise, they're a little bit wider than like a normal pencil you would use.
Awesome. And we have a question from Naomi, age 4. Do millipedes bite?
That's a wonderful question. So here at the museum, we have a saying that anything that has a mouth can bite you. But with that being said, not every animal that has a mouth will bite you. So our Florida ivory millipedes, they are decomposers. So they're going to be eating organic material that's already starting to break down. So their mouths are going to be adjusted for that. They're not going to be able to eat wood or, a finger or a live animal. That's going to be too hard for their mouths. So we say that they can, but I don't know a single person that's ever been bitten by a millipede before.
All right, so we have a question here. Dean, age 10, is wondering how long do they play? So how long do they get a chance to be in this maze?
That's a great question. It's kind of up to the millipedes themselves. Once I see them kind of stop interacting, once they've kind of become settled or decide to go to take a rest period, that will kind of be the end of it. But it's anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. And like Liz said, these guys, this is not all the enrichment that they get. Every other week, they get sound enrichment. So I put on a big thunderstorm in our invertebrate zoo, our insect zoo, with thunder and lightning, and they hear rain and they hear different animals, birds chirping. And that again is to give them something else to listen to and something to hear, something to explore. And they get, well, I'll put the speaker on top of their enclosure so they feel the vibration as well. Because insects and inverts and our millipedes here are really different than us. They see the world differently. They feel the world differently. It's not how we see it. So they actually feel, vibrations and those things a lot better than we do. So putting a big stereo on top of an enclosure, it rattles it and it gives them this sense of what a thunderstorm would really be like in the wild.
That sounds really cool. So we have some questions about how many legs do millipedes have?
That's a wonderful question. So millipedes, as their name says, it's for 1,000 legs. Millipedes don't really have 1,000 legs. I think the species that has the most legs is 750 legs. But what we say with millipedes is they have 2 pairs of legs per body segment. So Liz is giving you a pretty good look at all of those tiny legs crawling along the wood there. So that's 2 pairs of legs for every segment. So you'd have to count every segment to see how many legs our millipedes have. Centipedes, they have 1 pair of legs per segment. So they have about half the amount of legs that millipedes do.
Very cool. And we saw the millipedes kind of eating a few things in this maze. And there's a question is that some kind of rind or maybe a pickle kind of further up in the maze? I know I saw a millipede on top of it.
Yeah, so that is actually cucumber. That is one of our millipedes' favorites. They love cucumber. And they do get it almost every single week, but it's not very nutritional, so they do have to eat other things as well. The other food item in there is apple. And then, as you guys might have been able to see, there's grass in there. And then to the edge of the screen is leaf litter. So millipedes also love leaf litter. So I spend hours every week ripping up old leaves so that way our millipedes and a lot of our other animals can explore it, but also eat it. And that kind of leaps me back in. I know I kind of lost my train of thought earlier, but when I said we have 226 baby millipedes here at the museum with invertebrates, it's a really good way to tell if your animals are healthy, if they feel comfortable enough to lay eggs and their offspring look really healthy. That's a wonderful sign. That means that they are feeling so comfortable in their home, they think there's enough food, there's enough space, that they are then able to have babies. So these guys have a lot of babies, which is really good. And we'll actually be sending those babies out to other institutions, which is really cool. So that way we're not collecting these animals from the wild, we're breeding them in captivity and then able to pass them along so everyone can learn how cool millipedes are. And if I do say so myself, how adorable they are.
Awesome. And we are just about out of time. So I think we have time for one more question. And you kind of just talked about how you have all kinds of them at different stages of life. So how long do they live? What is their lifespan?
It's a great question. So millipedes live for about this species of millipede lives for about 5 years. So they're pretty long lived. I think we think of inverts and insects being really short lived. And, if you hear that an insect lives for a year, you're like, wow, that's so crazy. But these guys actually live for a really long time. So it is really fascinating to realize that, we got to keep this animal engaged and active for 5 years. This isn't just a short commitment that we're committing to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Corey and Liz, and all of our animals for sharing your awesome facts with us. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint and also share one more quick look at the millipede, if you guys would like to say your goodbyes.
And Becca, really fast, because I feel like we didn't really get to it. So I'm going to just throw this in at the end. For your animals at home, just like what you saw here, you can take anything, cardboard, old paper towel rolls, and old toilet paper rolls we use all the time. Put food in the middle, bend them around, engage with your animal, really look at their natural behavior, and you guys will do it. You can grow grass flats. We actually have a video on our website that shows you how to grow grass flats for your animals.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Corey. Hopefully you all can try that out with your own animals at home then. So again, here we have a look at our millipede. If you want to take a picture of this, you're more than welcome to. That way you have a little more information about them. And I would also like to just say thank you all for joining us today. It has been great. You had excellent questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of the questions, but we are doing this again next week. So feel free to join us for our more live animal programs and check out mos.org/MOS at home for any other awesome programs we have in the future. And if you enjoyed this one, feel free to check out engage.mos.org/welcome if you would like to support MOS at home. Once again, thank you all for coming very much and have a great rest of your day.